Our study this morning is in the 13th chapter of Jeremiah. Jeremiah chapter 13. Jeremiah chapter 13, beginning with the 10th verse. Begin our class with a word of prayer. Craig, would you lead us in a word of prayer? Amen. It's just amazing to me, and maybe to others, that the Jewish people were really up and down in terms of their devotion to God. It seems as we study the history of the Jewish people from the standpoint of the Old Testament, they were more often out of sync with God than they were in sync with Him. It's just amazing how they operated. One of the interesting, well, not necessarily interesting, but one of the real, I guess you'd say, traumas of the history was with regard to the golden calf. They had those Jewish people had a first-hand encounter with God. I mean, it was would have been an awe-inspiring encounter. The mountain quaking and the mountain smoking and fire, and Moses, in his intermediary relationship with them. It was it's just amazing that those people, after all of that exposure to God, would form a golden calf. I mean, that is just totally mind-boggling that they would do such a thing. And here Aaron was kind of an accomplice to the whole thing. Aaron, who was right there with Moses when all the miracles were performed, the Red Sea crossing, and there Aaron was an accomplice to this whole thing. And so, as God sent the prophets, and here now as we study Jeremiah, in the 13th chapter we have this repeat of the cycle of their having a good relationship with God, and then I guess in our language, a rotten relationship with God. In the book of Jeremiah, in the chapter that we're studying this morning, first 7 verses there, it just talks about their relationship, and it's kind of revealed this way. Jeremiah was told to go get a girdle, kind of what we would think of as a belt, and he was to not wash that, keep it from water, and then eventually you take it to the Euphrates. Now, that's a 300-mile trip. If in fact if he was, if in fact the Euphrates is the Euphrates River, and there's probably no reason to believe it wasn't. 300-mile trip, you go hide that girdle, that belt, and then you come back, and then you go find it again. It was all messed up. Now that's a lot of effort for an object lesson, isn't it? Wouldn't that be a lot of effort for it to as an object lesson? And the lesson in our terms was that he demonstrated to the Jews, you are a rotten people. You're no good for nothing. Is that the lesson? I mean, you have no value. Particularly, you have no value to God. So he discusses that in the first chapter of, or the first part of the chapter 13. And then we get into the area where we want to discuss today. This evil people which refuse to hear my words, which walk in the imagination of their heart, and walk after other gods to serve them and to worship them, shall even be as this girdle, which is good for nothing. For this girdle cleaveth to the loins of man. Now, I suppose in one way of thinking, the girdle was an apt illustration. The idea that you are there was a relationship between the Jews and God, and this girdle kind of represented a relationship. But the Jews being the girdle, they good for nothing. And for the girdle, as the girdle cleaveth to the loins of man, so have I caused to cleave unto me. He wanted them to cleave to him, obviously. The whole house of Israel and the whole house of Judah. Now, Israel had already been in captivity at this point, at the point where Jeremiah is speaking here. They'd already been in Assyrian captivity, so he lumps them together there. The whole house of Judah, saith the Lord, that they might be unto me a people, and for a name, and for praise, and for glory, but they would not hear. God nurtured these people. Why did he nurture them? That it had to do with the obviously their promise to Abraham, but he nurtured them as a what would you say for them to be an example to the world, and he would then be that God would be praised through them. Through them, God would be held up to the world in terms of his praise and his glory, be held up as a glorious example. David, did you have a...
Just looking over the text, it seems to me like girdles were something of a decoration. Maybe telling people that they were better at that time. The person wearing the shoulder girdle might have been a higher rank, kind of like dressing up formally with a cummerbund or something going for whatever.
Yeah.
And in this case, it was art and importance.
Yeah, well, and it did serve a purpose. The girdle did serve a purpose. For all people, it served a purpose to wrap their clothing, just like a belt serves a purpose for us. Now, obviously, there were some people that had better belts than others, more decorative, and David's point is that maybe this had to do with trying to demonstrate the importance of the Jewish people But just as, you know, you can buy a suit of clothes for $2,500 or $1,000, or if you can be like me and get a cheap suit, you wait till they're on sale and get 2 for 1 or one of those kind of deals. But so I suppose there was gradations, variations of the girdles. Somebody else had. I'm sorry, Ned.
I just think if we think of the children of Israel, as I'm finishing my daily reading and finishing Deuteronomy, when you think about Satan's job, all Satan had to worry about at that time were the children of Israel. Just like today, really all he has to worry about is Christians. The world is the world at that time. So Satan, all of Satan's efforts were on these people. And he knew that God was a jealous God, so number one thing to get at God was to have other gods for these, to tempt these people with knowing that that's where God's hot spot would be, if you would.
Yeah.
As far as Satan doing his job and focusing just on these prophets.
Ned bring forward an interesting point that God's that Satan's effort is just on the people that are trying to have a relationship with God, just like in the church today. His emphasis, the world out here doesn't need much encouragement to be bad. They're already bad. And so Satan's working on church people to be bad. Nikki? How's that? Satch. Well, yeah. And that David's point's well taken, as we've indicated. Therefore, he says. Therefore, he says they're rotten people. Therefore, thou shalt speak unto them this word. And this, thus saith the Lord, it comes across that expression, that phrase, continually in the book of Jeremiah, as well as other books. Therefore, thou shalt speak unto them this word. Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, every bottle shall be filled with wine, and they shall say unto thee, do we not certainly know that every bottle shall be filled with wine? Well, now, that wasn't a new revelation here. He would say, every bottle shall be filled with wine. Well, duh. That's that's what a wine bottle's for. And God says, and they'll say to you, do we not certainly know that every bottle shall be filled with wine? Then shalt thou say unto them, thus saith the Lord, behold, I will fill all the inhabitants of this land, even the kings that sit upon David's throne, and the priests and the prophets, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with drunkenness. Now, what's he saying there? You think this is just a common expression, but I'm going to fill this bottle. I'm going to fill this bottle, so to speak, with people, and they're going to be drunken. They're going to become drunken, but in what respect are they going to become drunken? How are they going to become drunken? I haven't been around too many people that are drunk. And I've never in my life tasted alcohol, except maybe some hard cider when I was a kid. I guess there's a little alcohol in hard cider. But how much capacity does a drunken person have?
Bill, I've been around some drunks, and they're really annoying and aggravating. They think they're right, they're loud, they're
Okay. Well, so they're incapacitated, right? They're incapacitated. Now, he continually talks about the enemy for the north coming in, and when the enemy of the north comes in, the Jews in Jerusalem or the villages around about, they're going to be incapacitated in terms of being able to deal with, will they be able to amass an army? Will they be able to resist? Not according to what Jeremiah is saying here. They're going to be like drunks that are just totally incapacitated. They are not able to think, they're not able to function. You see. Well, he says, he uses this illustration that they're going to be, which the bottom line of which is, they're going to be totally confused. They're not going to be able to do anything. They're just going to fall into captivity. They are absolutely going to be of no have no capacity to resist. And I will dash them one against another, even the fathers and the son together, saith the Lord. I will not pity, nor spare, nor have any mercy, but destroy them. He is putting them on notice that Jeremiah is putting them on notice that God is going to have no pity. Now, did they believe that? No, they didn't believe that because we have the temple. We're God's people. He won't, regardless of what we do, He won't forsake His temple, His people, His heritage. That was their attitude. But Jeremiah told those folks, and I will dash them one against another, even the fathers and the sons together, saith the Lord. I will not pity, nor spare, nor have mercy, but destroy them. Now, that should have been plain enough. And verse 15, hear ye, and give ear, and be not proud, for the Lord hath spoken. I wonder why he says now to be not proud. Be not proud. Arrogant. That's another derivation or a synonym of pride. Proud. Kind of just George references a proverb about having a proud look. Yeah. They were arrogant, to use your word.
It's like they feel like they're untouchable. Like it makes me think of the once saved, always saved mentality.
Yeah, they were. That's a good point, Nikki. They were arrogant. They were proud. They were, to use your word, untouchable. Yeah, God's not going to do anything bad to them. I think their attitude was, and he says, don't count on it. Don't be proud, for the Lord has spoken. By the way, I wonder why God's so negative toward pride, in a negative sense there. Why is God so negative? Okay, well, why is God so... That's a great point. Pride and arrogance puts people in their own mind being closer to God, being on the level of God, right? So, I mean, when God suggests humility, then we better pay attention. Because otherwise, you're trying to get on the level on God's level. And there isn't much for any human being to be really proud about. Pardon me?
Pride and arrogance. Look what happened with Lucifer. That's exactly what happened with him.
Yeah.
He said, "Well, I want to run things now."
Yeah. Well, in a sense, that's what's happened when Adam and Eve disobeyed God in the garden. In one respect, that's kind of, it was kind of like, well, who's God to say that we can't do this? Could that have been a reasoning? Who's God to say that we can't do this? But after all, I'm a human. After all, I can think. Somebody says, pardon me? Yeah, self-pride. Okay. Tim, you look like you had a thought there that was about ready to come out. Okay, guess not. Okay.
That's like saying one of your kids telling you, "Who are you to tell me what to do?"
Yeah.
What would you do?
I'd
That's fine.
I'd probably roll over and play dead. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good point, but I didn't roll over and play dead. Hear ye, verse 15, give ear, be proud, be not proud, for the Lord hath spoken. Give glory to the Lord. And how do you give glory to the Lord? Well, you start with obedience. Give glory to the Lord your God, because he caused darkness. Before he caused darkness, before your feet stumble upon the dark mountain, and while you look for light, he turned it into the shadow of death and make it gross darkness. Now, kind of a metaphor here is that you're traveling. A traveler is in a mountain. There's a mountain pass, that's narrow, and that's something you don't want to try to negotiate in the darkness, because it has pretty bad consequences. And that's kind of the metaphor here. He says that this will have the consequence of stumbling. Their attitude, their arrogance, going to make them stumble. In verse 16. But, in verse 17, if you will not hear it, if you don't listen up, if you'll not hear it, my soul shall weep in secret places for your pride, and mine eyes shall weep sore and run down with tears. Jeremiah is saying here, he was distraught when they didn't listen to him. He said, for your pride and mine eyes shall weep sore and run down with tears, because the Lord's flock is carried away captive. Now, it couldn't be much more plain. They were about to be destroyed as a political group, as a civil group, as a racial group. Jerusalem was about to be destroyed. And he's saying to the king and to the queen, saying to the king and the queen, what's he say there? Humble yourselves. Either they're going to humble themselves or they're going to be humbled. This is probably, he was probably prophesying or speaking to the king here. He was probably dealing with the king that's identified in 2 Kings 24. Let's go back to 2 Kings 24. Now, Jeremiah was dealing with real life situations. He wasn't dealing with philosophy, or he wasn't philosophizing. He was dealing with real life situations. And in the 8th chapter, or I'm sorry, on the 24th chapter, 2 Kings, beginning with verse 8. Let's begin with verse 5 there. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? So Jehoiakim slept with his fathers, and Jehoiachin his son reigned in his stead. Verse 7. And the king of Egypt came not again any more out of his land, for the king of Babylon had taken from the river of Egypt unto the river Euphrates all that pertaineth to the king of Egypt. Now, historically, the kings of, at that time, the kings of Judah kind of aligned themselves with Egypt. But then Babylon destroyed the influence of Egypt, and they kind of aligned, they did align with the king of Babylon. But that didn't do him any good, but that's just an aside. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. And his mother's name was Nehushta, the daughter of Elnathan of Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and according to all that his father had done. And at that time the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came against the city, and the servants did besiege it. And Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother, and his servants, and his princes, and his officers, and the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. And he carried out thence all the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house, and cut in pieces all the vessels of gold which Solomon king of Israel had made in the temple of the Lord, as the Lord had said. Now let's stop there a minute. And how, Jeremiah was saying to the kings, and particularly to Jehoiachin, saying, humble yourselves, or you're going to be humbled. Now, how humiliating would it be for a foreign nation come in and take the very vessels that Solomon put in the temple? I mean, if we had this is not a good illustration maybe, but if we had somebody come in, a foreign nation come in and take all the stuff from the White House, the Capitol, the Smithsonian Institute, all the national treasuries, all the treasuries of the nation. If we have some nation come in and take that, that'd be pretty humiliating, wouldn't it? And here, their national treasures were taken. And the king and his mother, they saw the writing on the wall, and they, with humility now, but they had no other choice but to be humble. They went out and raised the white flag. You know, we're your captives. Well, Jeremiah was in this mix, you see. So it was, they were humbled, all right. Verse 17 again. But if you will not hear it, my soul shall weep in secret places, Jeremiah says, for your pride and mine eye, because of your pride, and mine eye shall weep sore and run down with tears, because the Lord's flock is carried away captive. And say to the king and the queen, probably Jehoiachin and his mother, humble yourselves, sit down, for your principalities shall come. That principality there has your prestige. You were prestigious. Well, your prestige shall come down, even the crown of your glory. Not going to be any crown on his head when he's led away in captivity, obviously. See, Babylon destroyed Jerusalem in stages. And Babylon took away captives in stages. Ezekiel was among the first of the captives. And that was the first wave of taking them captive. And then I think there were at least 3 waves of assault where they were taking the Jews away into Babylonian captivity. And the cities of the south shall be shut up. That indicating that they're trying to defend themselves, and none shall open them. Judah shall be carried away captive, all of it, and shall be wholly carried away captive. I mean, gone. The social order is gone. The social structure is gone. The Jews are gone. Lift up your eyes and behold them, and come from the north. Well, it's getting pretty clear. Bad things are coming from the north, the Babylon area. Lift up your eyes and behold them that come from the north. Where is the flock that was given thee? Thy beautiful flock. God's flock, the Jews. He intended them to be a beautiful flock. But they're saying here, what happened? What, in verse 21, what wilt thou say when he shall punish thee? For thou hast taught them to be captains, and as chief over thee. Shall not sorrow overtake thee as a woman in travail? God didn't nurture this Jewish nation to be captive, to be destroyed. He didn't. That wasn't his intent. That wasn't what he was trying to accomplish. He wasn't. God wasn't interested in them being He was interested in them being captains, being captains in the sense of spiritual maturity and spiritual cleanness. But they're going to be taken away as sorrows take away as a woman in travail, or a woman in labor. It wasn't going to be easy. The point there, it wasn't going to be easy. This captivity wasn't going to be easy. And then in verse 22, and if thou say in thine heart, wherefore come these things upon us? For the greatness of thy iniquity are thy skirts discovered, and thy heels made bare. Well, they're going to say, well, what's the problem here? Why? Wherefore come these things upon me? Why are we going to be, exposed as a naked body? That's what he's getting there. Total humiliation. that skirts be discovered had to do with nakedness and being stripped of clothing and being held out as a person that has no dignity. So their dignity would be gone. I mean, there's no dignity whatsoever. And they just say, what's the problem here? Why is all this happening? Well, can an Ethiopian change his skin? Or a leopard his spots? Then may ye also do good that are accustomed to do evil. Now, he's posing some rhetorical questions here. Can a person change the pigment in his or her skin? Oh, obviously not. Can a leopard change the spots? Obviously not. Well, what's he getting at here? He's saying, you Jews, you people have been so entrenched in sin, in corruption. You've been so used to, this is your lifestyle. This is not only your, sporadic behavior, but this is your lifestyle. You're so ingrained in this sinful lifestyle that you're beyond hope. You've passed the Rubicon. You've crossed the Rubicon. No hope. You're beyond. You can't repent. You're so bad off you can't repent. I believe that's what he's saying. You're so bad. There's no way. There's no turning around. You're just. That's your lifestyle. That's you. Well, not a good. He says you're so accustomed to evil. You're accustomed to evil. Therefore, because of this, I will scatter them as the stubble that passeth away by the wind of the wilderness. The stubble, that which has not any, nutritive value to a human at least. I'm going to cast you away by the wind of the wilderness. This is thy lot, the portion of measures from me, saith the Lord, because thou hast forgotten me and trusted in falsehood. They trusted in falsehood, worshipped idols, therefore they are of no value, no good whatsoever. Therefore I will discover thy skirts, thy nakedness, that thy shame may appear. They were going to experience shame in this assault from the Babylonian folks. I have seen thine adulteries and thy neighing, that is, they're lusting after whatever is evil. The lewdness of the whoredoms, and the worship of Baal was a terrible, uncouth, not normal. It wasn't. It was just a terrible situation. I've seen thine adulteries, lewdness of thy whoredoms, and thine abominations on the hills and the fields. They had these worship places all over the place, all over the countryside, as well as in Jerusalem. Woe unto thee, O Jerusalem! Wilt thou not be made clean? When shall it once be? Well, that's a pretty sorry scene there. And in chapter 14, he continues, the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah concerning the dearth. What's a dearth? What's a drought? That area of the world was kind of used to droughts, right? And we read several examples in the Bible of a drought. But it says here that the drought, well, there must have been it must have been a drought that was pretty bad and was kind of memorable. None of you remember the big snow of 1954? Huh? No. You weren't even born yet, right? The big snow of 1954. I remember that big snow, northeastern Ohio. Snow way up, couldn't get anything. Had to walk 3 miles to feed the cattle because you couldn't move. So that stays in my head. Any of you remember the big storms of 1977, 1978? A few of you. You ought to remember that. These old folks over here remember that. Blizzard, yeah, that's a better way of looking at it. The blizzards, yeah, I remember that. There are certain events that you remember. Well, apparently there was this drought was memorable. He says the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah concerning the dearth, the drought. Judah mourned, and the gates thereof languish. They're blackened to the ground. The cry of the Jerusalem has gone up. Well, this drought, nothing, there was nothing saved. And their nobles have sent their little ones to the water. Go get some water, kid, or go get some water, servant, or whatever. Came back and there's no water. Pits are dry, the wells are dry. No water. They returned with the vessels empty. They were ashamed and confounded and covered their heads. That was a sign of great anxiety, great frustration. Verse 4, because the ground is chapped, that is, it's parched. It's just all bare. It's barren. Because the ground is barren, for there was no rain in the earth. The plowmen were ashamed. They covered their heads. Now, things are so bad that wouldn't be any use in plowing. Yea, the hind also calved in the field and forsook it, because there was no grass. So bad that the animals have young and they just forsake the young. And the wild asses did stand in the high places. They snuffed up the wind like dragons. They're sniffing for water, any moisture in the air. And their eyes did fail because there was no grass. O Lord, O Lord, though our iniquities testify against us, do thou it. For thy name's sake, for our backslidings are many, we have sinned against thee. Now, Jeremiah said, we acknowledge this, our sin, but I think he was saying, help us anyway. We'll stop there at verse 7 of Jeremiah 14.